is Greg Sankey the devil? Is Greg Sankey a bad person? He's not. And I think if you're a college football fan, I understand you want to live in this utopic society where you feel like your team is in a great position to win a championship. They're not. You want to feel like your school has a chance. They don't. That's the reality of college football. And that is not Greg Sankey's fault. As much as I think most college football fans outside of the SEC want to pin everything that's currently going wrong with college football, and that's a lot. You want to pin it on Greg Sankey, but you simply can't do that. Instead of pointing at Greg Sankey, look in the mirror, because you're going to hear from Sankey in a minute, and we're going to get into this in depth. The one thing that I would ask you is your favorite team. And look, for me as a Notre Dame fan, is my favorite team moving college football forward? I can actually say I don't think we are, but I don't think we're hurting it, right? Notre Dame gave up its voting power and its voice to make sure they were in the college football playoff every year. And last year, we almost won the whole damn thing, right? So I don't think we're hurting college football. I don't think we're helping college football. But there is one thing that is very clear. If your conference is not named the SEC, you're hurting college football. I say that about the Big Ten. I certainly say it about the Big 12 and the ACC, where the bar is extremely low to excellence. That a program like Indiana can roll into the Big Ten last year and feel like they had it all and Google me, I just win. And then you got your ass handed to you in South Bend. It tells me all I need to know about the quality depth that does not exist in the Big Ten. And when we look at the ACC, certainly there is no question. Clemson did the job last year. Florida State did not. But how many other teams in that league are even in the conversation for a college football playoff spot? The exact same thing about the Big 12. How many teams in the Big 12 last year were in the conversation for a college football playoff spot? 2, and if we stretch, maybe 3. Jake, that tells me the SEC is far and away the best conference in the country.
Yeah, it's the best conference in the country, and I think that this conversation around people hating on Greg Sankey is just completely unfounded. I think Greg Sankey has led this conference to all-time highs. I mean, let's face it, right? I mean, let's start listing off the sports that the SEC does well in. Football, obviously. Basketball, I would say a newer development by collegiate athletic terms, right? That's only been a thing for the last 2-3 seasons, but now it's definitely a thing, right? So football, basketball, pretty solid in baseball. Don't know if you're paying attention, pretty damn solid in softball, and the list continues. And so I look at this conference and I say, why is it that we blame them? Why do we shame them? Why do we say, nah, Greg Sankey's trying to destroy everything we love about college football, when this guy's out here leading the most successful conference in collegiate athletics? Yet we want to sit here and be like, nah, he's the bad guy. And I just have an issue with this because you don't get to have it both ways as a college sports fan. You don't get to say, well, our conference is being held hostage by the SEC, or, Greg Sankey's not giving the Big 12 or the ACC a fair shake. But did you give yourself a fair shake? Did you put in the effort? Did you, hold your conference, member institutions to a standard of excellence that is akin to the SEC? Because notice, nobody's saying that you have to be the SEC per se. All that we're saying is that you have to put in the same amount of effort. Your standards need to be at a similar level, on par with the level that you're playing at in sports, and you have to care. And I feel like that's the biggest difference, is that we all want to look at this dude and say, nah, Greg Sankey's a bad guy because he's trying to figure out how to shepherd everyone forward. But the difference is whether you want to complain about strength of schedule, you want to complain about how the basketball tournament's figured out, or whatever it might be. These guys have gone out and started winning in pretty much every area.
Yep.
And now that's why they have the power.
Well, I think the biggest issue is you have to hold every member institution in your conference to a very high standard. And I think any time that change happens, people are not comfortable with it. But we could all apply that to our own lives, where whether it's a job, a new girlfriend, a divorce, death in the family, like that change, no matter how severe, is uncomfortable. and you look at what college football and college athletics on the whole are going through, it's uncomfortable to talk about the House settlement. It's uncomfortable to talk about transfer portals, and this stuff is not easy. But I think when you listen to somebody like Greg Sankey, and again, I know that people hate when I say it, you don't have to like Greg Sankey, but he has earned your respect. I think it's very difficult to argue that. And you listen to him talk about the change in college athletics, and I don't know how you disagree with him.
The process of change is really exciting at the start. It's like running a marathon, which I've done a few times. Every time I've ever run a marathon, you can't sleep the night before. You're up early. You're at the start line. The start of anything is really exciting. And you go through that, and then you get to the end, and you see, running down Boylston in the Boston Marathon, or in Central Park in New York City, or crossing the river in Missoula, Montana to finish there. I mean, it's exciting, right? There's a finish line. The start and the finish is always invigorating and exciting, but the middle is messy, whether it's a marathon, whether it's decision making, whether it's change. And we are in the middle, and it's messy. That's not unique to college sports. That's not unique to higher education. That's not unique to American society.
No, it's not. It's not unique. Change is difficult, but this change, and in the comments section, I'm not trying to speak for you, certainly. In the comments section, do you feel like, one, you've done a good enough job hitting the like button today? Okay. Two, do you feel like this change is necessary? The change that we're seeing in college football. I think the House settlement and the finances and paying kids and profit sharing and revenue sharing, and you can't stand still when all of that is going on. I think the change was absolutely necessary from what we've seen, and the maturation of the money, the way that it is doubled and tripled and quadrupled. The kids had to get something. And I think that Greg Sankey is the guy who is pushing revenue generation forward. And if I look at Jim Phillips in the ACC, that guy has been so busy putting out fires in his own house. I don't know how they could be looking at growth and expansion. I look at the Big 12. I think Brett Yormark is the second best commissioner in all of college sports. Truly, I think he's done an incredible job. But the one failing in the Big 12, and I'm not saying that certainly this is Brett Yormark's fault, you don't have people that want to win.
Well, and I think that's kind of what this conversation is about, because in my opinion, change, like Greg said, it can be messy, and there's definitely, there are definitely stages to change happening. But I also think on the other side, or another point in this conversation, is there are different types of change, right? If you think about it, for a college football or college athletics administrator, there are different levels of change, meaning that if we're talking about the House settlement and we're talking about money and how that pertains to student athletes, that change is going to be, probably feel and be regarded differently than changing the model with which your conference and the member institutions get paid. Right. Obviously, as people, it goes without saying that we care a lot more about losing money than we do about how to make more money. So if we're all, in the Big 12 or the ACC or whoever you want to look at, if we're all at this certain level, right, this certain, this is our ground level, Greg's up here trying to say, hey, dude, we need to get to this level. And not everybody wants to go along with that thought process, which again puts guys like Greg Sankey in a really tough position when all you're doing is you're beating the hell out of everybody else who doesn't really want to change.
Because he's pulling people with
along,
him, right? That's the biggest issue. Is I think so many people, like when we talk about the Super League, I cannot tell you how many people ask me, well, how are you going to do that for basketball with the NCAA tournament? Nobody, including Greg Sankey, has ever said you're going to change college basketball when a Super League comes in.
But think about that. If you bring up a Super League to someone in their first response, or their reaction is, hey, well, how's basketball going to come along? Well, number one, it shows a little bit of a lack of understanding how it works, right? Or like the fact that it's possible to make a change to college football without having to even bring up college basketball. Because again, Brett Yormark, that we talk about so much on this show, was the innovator of the, hey, we're going to have a football segment and we're going to have a basketball segment.
They're
and
different
those two are going to be separate.
They're different businesses.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at, like, if you listen to Greg Sankey talk here a little bit, and then I really want to get into the comment section, because I think when we have conversations about Greg Sankey on the show, and I think we've seen this throughout the last at least 2 years, anytime Greg Sankey comes on the show, there's no middle. He's a jackwagon. He's amazing. That's it. There's nothing in the middle. Nobody's like, nah, Greg Sankey, take him or leave him. Nobody is in the middle, right? So I really want your comments on this. But if you listen to Greg Sankey talking about strength of schedule, for instance, I think you guys know I have beat the drum on this show for strength of schedule being one of the most important metrics to determining who is in and who is out of any college football championship. So obviously I agree with King Sankey on this.
Whether people want to agree with it or not, that's up to them. We can go through the analytics and show the rigor of our schedule is different than anyone else's, period. And we had a learning session in September at the CFP about strength of schedule, and strength of schedule isn't everything, but it is an important factor. I remember very clearly one of the messages was, if you play the top-ranked team and the 130th ranked team, those two games average out to 65.5. If you play 65 and 66, they average out to 65.5. And so the advisor said, you're just as well playing 65 and 66. Here's my problem. But for maybe one, maybe two teams in a year, we don't have 65 or 66, and everybody else has a group.
Exactly. The SEC doesn't have 65 and 66. And what is the other thing that we always hear about when it comes to strength of schedule? The SEC, Monty, they got to play 9 games. Okay, why though? Why? You have a conference in football, and to your point now in basketball, but let's keep the two separate. You have a conference in football that is on a regular basis deeper and more difficult head-to-head inside of itself than any other conference in the country.
And nobody disagrees.
The Big Ten is not deep. The Big 12, the ACC, they're not deep. Look how deep the SEC is. So if you want the SEC to play 9 conference games, you got to expand the college football playoff. There's no other way around it, because why should they play a significantly more difficult schedule than the Big Ten, than the Big 12, than the ACC? Why should they do that? There's no reason for them to do that. Now, if you expand to 16, which I am telling you, I continue to hear from the people I talk to, especially the people in TV. Television wants 16 teams in the college football playoff. They want it. It's more money. It's more games. It's a longer college football level of interest for the average viewer. It turns an average viewer into a passionate viewer in December, because games in December have a lot more leverage than the Poughkeepsie State Pool and Weed Eater Plumbers Union Bowl, right? Like, those games matter. TV wants 16. And if you are Greg Sankey, if you go to 16, then you can play 9 conference games. There's more margin for error. But if you're at however many you want to point to here, if you're at 8, if you're at 12, why would you play 9 conference games? That's suicide. You are literally saying, I don't want to make more money in a 12-team playoff. Yeah, I don't want to make more money. Let's play 9 conference games. That's what you're saying.
Well, and I also think it's a conference championship game conversation. I mean, I just think and this is where the water gets really murky because, again, it's like this question of, and this is what I think pisses people off, but this thing that I've been seeing all over the place for quite some time about how, Greg Sankey has this responsibility to consider the greater good versus what's best for the SEC. And I'm telling you, whether you like it or not, what's best for the greater good is the SEC continuing to play the biggest games in college football. Because I can tell you right now, I'm not here for average-ass Big 12 game. I'm here for big-time SEC or SEC Big 10 matchup. That's what I'm here for. Like we can all stop beating around the bush of like, oh, well, Penn State and Boise State, man, that was a hell of a matchup, guys. No, it actually wasn't. It wasn't.
No,
now,
it wasn't.
And by the way, Notre Dame and Indiana wasn't really all that great of a matchup, was it?
And I don't understand why the Big 12 and the Big 10 play 9 games. Now, in the Big 10, bro, you're not deep. The Big 10 is how many teams in the Big 10 last year? I mean, obviously an undefeated Oregon team, right? I mean, Oregon's 9-0. Was Indiana really a good football team? Was Indiana one of the
best teams in college football?
No, it was not. No, it was not. Sorry.
I win. Google me.
And I'm happy to Google you. I know that you got your ass beat routinely.
Google me.
And this is the argument that now we're having, right? Because if I look at Indiana's schedule, oh, Monty, they play 9 conference games. It's not fair. Okay, help me then. You help me. Indiana's schedule last year, Florida International, 31-7. They win. Western Illinois, 77-3. At UCLA, Charlotte, Maryland, at Northwestern, Nebraska, Washington, at Michigan State, Michigan, at Ohio State. You got your doors blown off by the Bucks.
Around and find out.
In the first real game you played.
Yes.
Think about that. That was November 23rd. That's the first real game that you played. And then you beat Purdue 66-0. You go to the college football playoff and you were never in the Notre Dame game. Was Indiana really a good team? No, they were not.
And by the way, they beat you without a quarterback, just saying.
I mean, we can go on and on about this. But when you look at the Big Ten, it's not a deep football league.
So I understand. The point is,
I know why they play 9 games.
Why they play 9, right? But again, just the way we understand why they would play 9 or the Big 12 would play 9, we know why the SEC is only playing 8 because they don't have to play 9. This is not hard to understand.
I think playing 9 games is really, really not smart. If you are the SEC, if you're the Big 12, Oak State's not going winless. Who was at the bottom of that league? Arizona last year, UCF, Utah's not going to be 2-7. Houston's not going to be. But my point is, you look at all the teams. What is the good team? Potential college football playoff team. Where is that line last season in the Big 12? It probably stops at BYU. I do not believe that Colorado was good enough to play in the college football playoff. I think if you'd have put BYU in or Iowa State in, I think they'd have been fine. Arizona State, but for that call, I think those 3 teams, and I'm stretching with BYU.
Right.
And I think I'm probably stretching based on Iowa State's games and their flow of last year. I'm not even sure Iowa State belongs there.
But again, you look at this league, with all due respect to the Big 12, and I'm a huge proponent of Brett Yormark and his abilities as a commissioner. This league should not be putting in more than 2 teams to the college football playoff. Mainly because the league is not deep enough to justify that.
Yeah.
Right? And I just think that pisses people off. So then, let me put a bow around this so we can get to the comment section. Then we fast forward to the PR, back and forth in the public eye war going on between the SEC and everybody else. And you listen to Greg Sankey talk about how, hey, like, I'm trying to push things forward and I'm not really getting a lot of solutions from everybody else. I'm getting a bunch of complaining and a bunch of negativity, and I don't want to hear your media releases and all that. This, I'm telling you, this war of Greg Sankey can come out here with a massive stick and beat you over the head with it when you haven't really said anything. This is the problem for the Big 12 and the ACC.
I don't need lectures from others about good of the game. I don't lecture others about good of the game. And coordinating press releases about good of the game. Again, okay, you can issue your press statement, but I'm actually looking for ideas to move us forward.
He's not about press releases.
So then the natural reaction obviously would have been, hey, well, Brett Yormark is clearly going to react to that, right? No. Now, Brett's not going to react. His vice president of communication and strategy is going to retweet Thamel and say there was no press release from the Big 12, let alone a coordinated one with the ACC.
Which, great, and I'm not trying to be hard on the Big 12. Greg Sankey never said that the Big 12 and the ACC had a coordinated press release. He never said that. He said, I'm not going to, Greg Sankey's point is, I act, I don't talk. I don't coordinate and make statements in the media because I think Brett Yormark doesn't need a press release. Sit in front of a camera and the guy is compelling as hell.
Yeah.
When he's talking about the college football playoff last year, or the logos. What's the standard? Are we selecting it based on logos?
Yeah, the committee's about logos, not records.
Yeah, he doesn't need to make a press release. I'm not even certain that Greg Sankey was talking about Brett Yormark in the Big 12 and the ACC. I think he was much more talking about other schools. I think he was much more talking about Boise State, for instance, or Greg Sankey doesn't need your approval. And I think it is fascinating to me if you watch the way they are moving. And if you're new to the show, and I know we have a lot of new viewers seemingly on a daily basis on this show. 1, please hit the like button. 2, please subscribe. But if you go back and look at our content on this, I will continue to tell you, Greg Sankey's not talking about the College Football Super League. He is talking about the very survival of college football. He's not, in my opinion, a guy, and he has said this 100 times, and I'm certain you think I'm fanboying over Greg Sankey. I'm not. But go back and listen to what he actually talks about. Greg Sankey has never talked about eliminating anyone. Greg Sankey wants you to do everything you can do to win every single game you play. It's my biggest complaint in the Big 12. I point to it almost every day, I feel like, when Oak State James shows up wearing purple for TCU. I say every day.
Sorry if you're offended by that.
You can't cut the head coach's salary and then say, well, we did that because we can't afford NIL.
Well, I think
you can't do that and call yourself a winner.
Yeah, and I think this harkens back to the old Kobe was a bad teammate narrative, right? Everyone said, oh, well, Kobe's an asshole.
Mike, too.
Mike's an asshole. These guys are terrible teammates, and they're just out for themselves. But the reality was, like you were saying, right? They might have been the jerk in the locker room, but the reality was they were trying to get the most out of you to get to the highest, best result possible.
And they won.
And so, the obvious and clear difference is that those guys were individual athletes and they had the ability to go out and affect change in a much more effective way. Whereas Greg is out here trying to pull along, hundreds of people. I mean, if we're being honest, like obviously you've got the 3 other commissioners, but beyond them, you've got these presidents and, all these people.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see where this lands and how all this plays out. But I'm going to tell you, Greg Sankey's never going to say the word Super League. But if you don't think that the Big Ten and the SEC are looking for the quickest, most effective avenue to not be involved with the NCAA anymore for football, you're out of your mind. And if you are the Big 12 and the ACC and the membership of that, you should be looking for the quickest exit from the NCAA. It is as simple as that. You need a new entity where you can drive new revenue, you can have less oversight and less rules regarding who gets paid and how it gets, and you can make your own rules.
Yeah.
You have the President of the United States on board for significant change. It can't wait 6 years. I continue to tell people this. You look at what's going on in this country right now. Now is the time to make change. Now is the time to do it. You don't like it. It's not comfortable. Now is the time to do it because this is when it can get done.
Yeah.
And you got to figure it out. It is very difficult, in my opinion. It is very difficult to figure out how to make seismic, never before seen changes to a game like college football. When you have so many people wearing their heart on their sleeve who have no idea what they're talking about. Just no idea what they're talking about. You look at most of the schools in the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12 have no idea what winning looks like. They don't know. They have. Is there anybody here who believes that Northwestern's doing everything they can do to win every single football game?
Nope. But by that same question, is there anybody who believes the Big Ten gives a damn about whether Northwestern wins or loses?
I don't think so.
No, they probably don't, because they want the big brands to win in that conference. And again, I'm just bringing that up to say the SEC doesn't care about big brands because they already have the biggest brands. That is why they are, from top to bottom, the best conference in college football. And it is the key difference. It is Greg Sankey and company don't have to worry about, well, gosh, for BYU, I mean, if we lose one game, our season's over. We don't got to worry about that. The question is not one, it's three. And again, if you go and look at what Kalen DeBoer said, dude, Kalen DeBoer is like, hey, why don't you look at our schedule and then ask us how we feel about being left out of the college football playoff? like the schools in the SEC are pissed. You know, Lane Train and Kalen DeBoer and all these dudes not getting in who were fringe teams by SEC standards. They're upset about it. So no, they're not going to play 9 conference games. And yes, at some point you're going to have to come along and make concessions.
And again, I go back to the loser athletic director, who's the worst chair of the college football playoff selection committee we've ever seen. Embarrassment last year, just not considering strength of schedule at all. Because I don't know how else you would describe how it is that they seed those teams and how, well, just mysteriously, Penn State got a free ride while Ward Manuel's biggest rival had the most difficult path anybody has ever seen to a college football championship and kicked the crap out of everybody.
Yeah.
It's the single greatest college football championship we've ever seen won. And you want to argue against strength of schedule, and you want to argue against P4 victories. Hey, how many power conference teams did you beat? What is your strength of schedule? And those two are different, but inextricably, without question, married to each other because of Greg Sankey's 1 versus 66, 65 versus 66. Like, the strength of schedule matters. Because if you're in the SEC, you're playing top 20 teams every week. If you're in the Big 10, Big 12, and ACC, you simply are not.
Yeah.
And it's that simple. All right. Let's get your comments in here. Grad Slacker, first one in today. Good to see you, sir.